Hi everyone, this is Jim Tolles. I write regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com and I'm a spiritual teacher, and today I want to talk about what is intuition. Intuition is one of these terms that I think is often kind of confused and at the same time one of the most important things that you can develop within yourself, because what is intuition? In the simplest form, it is your inner knowing. It is that deeper part of you that already knows your answers, already has all your wisdom, and nobody can ever give you your intuition. Nobody can ever give you your wisdom. It's already there. And a lot of the work that goes into the path really is a letting go and an uncovering of all the veils and all the things that are covering up this level of inner knowing that you already have. One of the things that's not is it's not superstition. It's not like, there's a black cat crossing the street and throwing salt over your shoulder or any sort of kind of strange, magical, cryptic stuff. It's really not that. It's a very simple, clear space inside of you. And it's often not clear initially because people have so much fear layered around it. But an intuition that is clear is never coming with the urge to do something out of fear or control, right? It can be so clear that it just sounds like a little part of you saying, go right, just like that. It's nothing big. And usually what happens next is the mind runs and it's like, well, why should I go right? What's going down there? I want to go left. I want to go straight. And all the different things that run through your mind next. Intuition tends to be the first thing that you hear in your head. What comes after is usually your social programming that's, in your mind saying that's coming through a bunch of evaluation techniques, emotional techniques and stuff like that that have been built in. And I'm using technique loosely. It's just, the program that you have and your immediate response. It's very reactive and it's not coming from that space of clarity. But initially, most people, you've got your intuition as kind of covered by all these different things. So a lot of people say, I can't hear it. I can't hear my inner knowing. For some people, they kind of go for a third party, to get into angels and guides and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm very careful about that when I talk to students and with people, because I don't want you to get caught up in the idea that your wisdom is over here now. It doesn't matter if it's a spiritual, being that's you're trying to give it to. No less than, it's not helpful if you're giving your inner awareness and your intuition to me. And I say giving in the sense that you're projecting that part onto somebody else. So if you're projecting onto a guide or onto me, ultimately what you're seeing is part of you. And any connection in that spiritual plane that you may have, ultimately they're trying to help you get back to listening to you. They don't actually have your power or have your answers. But I can hear there's certain kind of elements in the new age world where they start to go, well, I should go ask my guides about this. And it's like, well, that can be a nice first step, right? To like open yourself into that space and to have an awareness of, that there's a lot more going on in this world than what's just happening in the physical realm in the body. But after a certain point, it becomes more and more critical that you're owning that inner knowing and that truth and that wisdom and that conduit inside yourself. And it is a little bit different than like channeling. That's another term that's kind of running around out there. And that's that sense that you're pulling information in from the universe through you and out you. That's a little bit different, has a different feel to it. And there's some ways that I do a lot of that with my blog. And even as I'm talking, because it's like there's that energy that comes through, but it's still me at the same time. It comes from an outside source, but it's not coming from an outside source. And that's kind of that blending of duality, where that really is that kind of connection to oneness. And so you're part of that oneness, but you're also separate, which sounds like a paradox, but it's really not. And that's another piece of the puzzle for a lot of people mentally, is to let go of these ideas around paradoxes and mutually exclusive. Like it can only be one thing, it can't be both. Well, in the spiritual world, it tends to be yes, yes, and more. So coming back to the intuition, right? And coming back to developing that clarity, that's part of the reason why you start to meditate and you start to journal, is you're starting to look at what is this crap inside of me. Like a lot of people think like I'm going to get enlightened, so they like sit there and they meditate really, really hard. It's like, what are you doing? Sometimes I see people doing that when I'm, at a different spiritual group or a meditation group, and there's a silly side to me that just kind of wants to go over and poke them and be like, what are you doing? Seriously, you are trying way too hard. Where are you trying to go? You're right here. You're right here. You can't go anywhere. You can't meditate harder, faster, longer like that. This isn't a rap song. You're trying to make yourself a super meditation person. And it's not that you can't, through lots of meditation, get into some really high spaces for a while, but usually nobody can integrate them, right? Because integrating means using them throughout the rest of your day, which is just crucial. So usually when I'm talking to people about meditation, I'm most interested in encouraging them to pay attention to themselves. Let go of this idea of getting something, but pay attention to what's going on inside. What are you thinking about? What are you fixated on? What are the old mental programs saying? And there's a lot of these different things that we don't think about because we're so busy running around trying to live our life and achieve things and going here and there and then take the kids to soccer practice and then come home and cook. And you're just so lost in that daily grind and keep going round and round and round. You don't know who you are. How could you possibly hear your intuition through all that noise? Consider it like being at a rock concert with a jet engine going at the same time. The person in the back saying, hey, you need to go start writing this book. You can't hear him. It's not that the voice isn't there. It's all the noise that's in the way. This is why, at initial phases, I think, doing stuff with like retreats can be a real helpful thing. So going on a spiritual retreat, it doesn't even have to be like an official spiritual retreat with a teacher or anything. It can just be going camping in the woods where you spend a week out there and you slow down and you start to listen to yourself and you do some journaling, you do some meditation, you do some hiking and things like that. You're out around nature, where you don't have the same sort of frenetic energy that we have going on in the society. People are exhausting themselves and they're going to get really, really hurt because they're doing too much all the time and aren't nourishing themselves. And this is a good place to take a step out of that, and you can do it in the name of practicing listening to your intuition. In fact, you may already have an intuition from listening to this, about, wow, I really need to do that. Or maybe your intuition goes the other way, says, no, I don't need to do that right now. And that's what's important. It's like only you know. It's like it has nothing to do with what I'm saying. What you're doing when you're listening to something like this, like a video or reading one of my blogs or any other spiritual teacher, is you're trying to relax into this space where you listen to see what feels true. That's your inner knowing. So you can be practicing it right now. And practice is important. In many respects, intuition is like a muscle. We all have it. The more you use it, the better you tend to get at it. And that's just how duality works. And another way to look at it is like the more stuff that you clear out from your life, so that's kind of the doing part. The more you're just dropping into being, and then there is no real practice to intuition. Like it's just there because there's nothing else that's in the way. So once again, this is kind of that paradox that you kind of work with in the spiritual world, where there's a certain level of doing that's necessary because we live in a body, and there's a certain level where it's just letting go. And there is no real doing to it. It's just coming into that space of presence. And everybody is at different places in their path. And so different things are going to be appropriate at different times for you. As I said, come back to your inner knowing as you're listening to me. What is feeling true for you to do? And this is where like the term resonance is really, really popular. That really resonates with me. And I like to term it in two different ways. So the first way that I term it is in the sense that it feels good. So something that I said is like, that's right. You have that click, it feels good. Those are the resonances that, are pleasurable and aren't really running up against your programming. So you're like, oh yeah, okay, I can do that. That feels right. The other kind I tend to call activations, where suddenly something hits a chord, but there's that resistance in you that doesn't want to hear it. And so now you're angry or sad or scared or arguing and said, no, he's wrong. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I can't do that. I've got all these obligations. My life is very, very busy. You see? Right? There is some truth there, and you resisted it. Because ultimately what's hitting here, that's not actually so much me hitting, that's you. That's that part of you that heard it and started moving and wanted to connect with what I said, running into you, another part of you that said, I can't do that. And that's so common. It's like, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. I'm scared of doing that. All these big issues. And whenever you hit up to this is a great place to journal, to talk about with, somebody who's close to you who can hear these things. working with a spiritual teacher, working with a psychologist. There's so many different ways that you can get at what is this wall that you've got in yourself. And learning to own it is a huge piece of this puzzle. You have to own the parts of you that you've created. You have to own all of you. We're not looking to like cut things out, right? We're not chopping this hand off saying this is a bad hand. What we're saying is, what is this hand and what is it doing? And it's here. Like, I created it. So what is that about? So those are some initial ways to look at intuition. As you go, as I said, it gets clearer and it's very neutral. It's not going to come from an emotional impulse. It'll tend to be like, I should do this, or this feels right. I should talk to that person. I should go to a plane to Milwaukee. It's intuition. There's really no rhyme or reason to it, and it's not going to make sense a lot of times. Sometimes you're going to get validated for intuition, where you go and you do something, and you're like, this is why I needed to do this. And that's a wonderful time, but sometimes you're going to have intuitions and you never really get that validation. And that's part of it. And it really isn't trying to control things. It's not coming from any sort of cryptic sense of, I don't know, doing any sort of magical things, or I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that gets layered on now in kind of the new age speak about what this intuition is and what the feel is. But I've always found it's very simple. It's very clear. And I think one of the examples that I can leave you with that, ends up I got some validation for was I was into a lot of the conscious dancing stuff that was going on, and it is still going on, about 2 years ago. And I was having a lot of fun. There's this big event that was coming up, and everyone was telling me about it. And I kind of have a threshold. If I've heard something from 3 different people that don't know each other, it's like, well, maybe this is something I should check out. But my intuition was saying, you know what? This June, I really need to stay close to home, And so I was like, well, I really want to go to this thing. So that's the mental programming, right? Talking where I'm hearing the intuition. It's like, you should really stay close to home. And so one night I'm coming back from a dance, and I'm just feeling, really kind of cramped and bloated. It was very, very strange for me. And I couldn't get to sleep the whole night. And then by the morning, I'm in like the emergency room because I've got appendicitis. And fortunately, I was only 13 minutes away from a hospital because I stayed close to home, because that was the same weekend that this big event was going on, and I would have been out in the middle of nowhere somewhere, who knows how far away from a decent hospital. So that's one of the ways where I got a big validation. It was a couple of years ago, and I had, the surgery I would have wanted. It was minimally invasive. And, I also had an intuition after the last job. I had to buy my own healthcare, so I had healthcare and I'd taken care of myself. So this is one of those ways where you can see in a very clear way how critical intuition can be in your life. Because as I said, I have no idea what would have happened if I was out in the middle of this event in nature somewhere. So I hope this gives you some ideas about intuition and ways to approach it, and some of the purposes of the spiritual tools and how we use them. Because as I said, intuition and inner knowing, I use them synonymously. You already have them. Nobody can give you these. And they're such essential pieces to continue to cultivate, especially on the spiritual path, because there's so much stuff being said these days. And it's important to be able to cull through good and bad advice. There's some good advice that's not appropriate, and then there's bad advice that you really do want to stay away from. To just keep coming back saying, okay, what feels right for me to do? What's appropriate for me? What feels in alignment? And sometimes those intuitions are going to take you right into some core fears. And so that's why this practice over time really is helpful, because then you can have a sense of like what this fear is talking about. If it's actually an inappropriate way of saying you shouldn't do something, or if it's just old fear that's part of an old story that is really inhibiting your growth. And when I'm saying, a fear that's inappropriately saying not to do something, it's like, being afraid of a grizzly bear when it shows up. It's like that fear is telling you you should get away, but it may not be inappropriate because it can freeze you and not allow you to do and think properly in that sort of situation. So on that note, I hope you've enjoyed this. Obviously I'll be talking a lot more about intuition and inner knowing in other videos, because it's so core and so central to the whole spiritual process of opening yourself up to yourself. As always, my name is Jim Tolles. I blog regularly at spiritualawakeningprocess.com. I hope you enjoyed this.